Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be doing my preview for the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix. This is definitely one of the Grand Prix that I look forward to quite a bit every year. A lot of great action, a lot of great overtaking, and that combined with the weather, something that we might have this weekend, it can definitely spice things up quite often. So starting off these previews, as I always do, with a look at last year's race. So for last year's Grand Prix, it was of course won by Max Verstappen, like so many of last year's races were. Second on the podium was Lando Norris, really strong drive from 6th on the grid. And third in what would be, as of the recording of this video, his most recent podium in F1 was Fernando Alonso. So some big talking points from last year's race. I think first off, you had the fact that Charles Leclerc didn't even start the race. He basically pulled over on the formation lap for some kind of mechanical issue. I think it was a hydraulics problem, but that was something that unfortunately kept him out of last year's race. And then when we did get going, we had quite a bit of action right away as Kevin Magnussen and Alex Albon came together at the first corner. And that basically, one of the side effects of that was that it left, I think, Albon or Magnussen, one of the two of them, one of their tires basically went flying in the air, and it came back and it landed on Daniel Ricciardo's rear wing. So Ricciardo, this was a race that was basically wrecked by very unfortunate circumstances. Rear tire landing on his rear wing, which obviously you don't want it landing anywhere near your head. But I think it hit him, and then I think Piastri also got damaged. But basically, the race got wrecked because of that crash. Too much debris on track, and the two of them basically had to start a lap down, and their races were ruined. Another really notable part of last year's race was the fact that it was such a bad race for Mercedes. This was, of course, the race that they had won the year prior, 2022, with George Russell winning his first ever Grand Prix. Again, one of the main differences, though, was that this was a sprint weekend, so only having one practice session set up. And then, of course, with last year's rules, you had qualifying first, and then sprint qualifying, and then the sprint. So Parc Fermé started from that Friday qualifying session, so he didn't really have any opportunity to change things, and Mercedes didn't really get the right setup for the car. And then, of course, the big moment in the final closing moments of the race was that intense fight for that final spot on the podium between Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso. Alonso eventually re-overtaking Perez after he had lost the position before that, and then, of course, the two of them having that great drag race to the checkered flag. Now, taking a look at the circuit itself, Interlagos circuit, a track that we've been going to for a long time. Let's see if I can read properly. 15 corners on the track, but of course, some of them not really braking zones, so you actually have quite a few less real corners. Two DRS zones from Jinsao turn 12 down to turn 1, and then from the end of the Senna S's at turn 3 down to turn 4. Realistically, turn 1 is your best spot to make an overtake, but that being said, it's not easy. And as we saw with Lewis Hamilton 2021, if you can get a really strong exit out of turn 12, then that can be massive in terms of being able to overtake the cars in front of you easily, and also in terms of being able to defend from the car behind. But it is a bit of a tricky spot, as Nico Hulkenberg and Lewis Hamilton found out in 2012. Of course, that was a really unfortunate race for Hulkenberg. He was leading, came together with Hamilton, and never really had a shot at leading a Grand Prix again after that. Turn 4, though, is another really good opportunity, but as long as you don't be like Max Verstappen and basically push your rival, whoever you're defending, attacking against, wide off track, then you should be able to make passes through here. Of course, forcing drivers off track was a big talking point in that race, and again, it's been a big talking point in the last two races. So with quite a bit of runoff at Interlagos, I would not be surprised if it's a talking point again, especially if Max Verstappen is involved. Final spot that I just wanted to highlight, basically through the middle sector 2, a lot of slow medium corners, not really overtaking spots unless you have a massive tire advantage or you're Alex Albon in the Red Bull in 2019 on fresh soft tires. Unfortunately for him in that occasion, came together with Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton, of course, was penalized for that, but that was definitely, it felt like a turning point in Alex Albon's F1 stint. Now, going over some facts for the race, 4.309 kilometers is the distance of the lap. And just like Mexico, we should have 71 laps on Sunday. The race lap record is a 1:10.540, which was set by Valtteri Bottas in 2018. The average speed of that fastest lap is 220 kilometers an hour, which ranks 12th of the 24 tracks on the calendar. In terms of downforce, this is a new stat that I kind of calculated. 0 is high downforce, so basically your Monaco spec setup, and then a 1 would be low downforce, so this is kind of your Monza type setup, and I've basically been playing around with numbers to try to calculate this kind of number. But basically, Interlagos is a 0.61, so that means it's slightly less downforce than average, basically. Full throttle, about 64% of the laps. That's pretty average, I would say. And pole conversion rate from 2010 up till 2023. I haven't gone before that because, with the refueling era, a lot of the pole positions were a lot less representative of true pace as they are today. But from 2010 to now, 62%, which is actually pretty high, despite the fact that overtaking is pretty easy around this track. Let's see. Now, moving on to the weekly schedule, there looks like there might be some rain this weekend. So for Friday, free practice 1, 11:30 in the morning. Sprint qualifying 3:30 in the afternoon. The weather for sprint qualifying, partially cloudy, 23 degrees. Doesn't look like there's going to be any rain, but both Saturday and Sunday look like they're going to be quite wet. So the sprint on Saturday, 11 a.m., qualifying at 3 p.m. local time. And the weather for qualifying, I think scattered showers is what Google said, 23 degrees and 40% for the start of qualifying. But it looks like it's 40% for several hours before, several hours after. So again, I expect either rain during the session or I expect a wet track. So we'll see what happens. Of course, that could affect the sprint as well. Then we get to the Grand Prix on Sunday, 2 p.m. start, 23 degrees, and showers is the weather forecast, 50%, so a little bit more than Saturday. So again, we'll see if we have a rain-affected Grand Prix. That could definitely throw a wrench in both the drivers and constructors championship. And unfortunately, with the way FIA have been with wet races recently, would not be surprised if it's either a delayed start or we have some kind of long red flag period on Sunday afternoon. Taking a look at the tires for this weekend. So soft C5, medium C4, hard C3. Softest 3 tires in the Pirelli range. These are actually a step softer than we usually see at the Brazilian Grand Prix, and a step softer than last year. So we'll see if that changes the strategy from perhaps a 1-stop to a 2-stop. But if there's any rain on Sunday, all those tire strategies just basically go out the window, and we'll basically just have whatever goes. Now, taking a look at best qualifiers, worst qualifiers for this track. Best qualifier, Max Verstappen. He has out-qualified his teammate every single year at this track. Median qualifying gap, 0.369 seconds. Number 2, Lando Norris, also 100%, but I think he only has four races here, because I know one year, there's, actually no, I think it might only be 3, because we didn't race here 2020, and I think his first year against Sainz didn't set a lap in qualifying. But anyways, for Norris, still 100%, and median qualifying gap, 0.309 seconds. And number 3 is Nico Hülkenberg, the guy who set a pole position here in his rookie season. He's out-qualified his teammates here 90% of the time. Median qualifying gap, 0.244 seconds. Now, looking at the worst qualifiers, worst qualifier here, bit of a surprise, also a guy with a pole position here, although very, very different circumstances. I guess, well, actually, very similar circumstances to Hülkenberg, but definitely very unique circumstances. 14%, and actually that pole position, that year he got the pole position, 2022, was actually the only time he's out-qualified a teammate around Brazil, so quite opportunistic. Median qualifying gap, a positive 0.176. Number 2, a driver who's been on this list a lot this year is Lance Stroll, 17%, median qualifying gap 0.23 seconds. And number 3, bit of a surprise, Charles Leclerc, only out-qualifies his teammate here 20% of the time, but the median qualifying gap is very, very small, 0.09 0.97 seconds in the positive, of course. Now, finishing up with some predictions for this weekend, I think this is going to be a pretty tough one to predict, especially if it's wet. If it's dry, I think I'm going to go with a Lando Norris win, though. I think there's enough medium and high-speed corners here that I think the McLaren should do quite well. And the McLarens have also been very, very fast on race pace. They have struggled in qualifying sometimes, but this is a track where overtaking is pretty easy. So I don't think it will be like Mexico where Norris basically got stuck behind Verstappen for the entire first stint of the race. So I do think between that and the fact that both McLaren are not both Ferrari drivers don't have a great record here in qualifying, I think Norris should be pretty handy here. If it rains, I think all bets are off, and that's a completely different story. Norris doesn't have the best record in the wet, from what I recall, but again, that's a very, very different situation, obviously. Number two, I think I made this prediction with thinking that it's probably going to be wet, and I think I've gone with the Max Verstappen for second, which basically just contradicted what I said before. But if it's dry, I don't think Verstappen gets a podium, just because I think the race pace in the races has been atrocious. Last couple of races was pretty bad in Mexico. Austin was a little bit better. But that being said, it is a sprint weekend, and for whatever reason, Verstappen generally tends to do pretty well in those weekends. And again, this is a track where he does do very well at, but again, we said that about so many tracks recently. We said that about Mexico, we said that about Austin, said that about Zandvoort as well, and that hasn't really affected the end result anyway. So if it's wet, I think Verstappen should be able to get a podium. We know how good he is in the wet. If it's dry, honestly, I don't think there's a podiums on, but again, with the forecast, who knows, whatever. And I've just decided to put Verstappen second anyway. Rounding out the podium, I'm actually going to go with Carlos Sainz. Even though I said he had a pretty bad record in qualifying, he did get a podium here in 2019 from last on the grid. And again, if it's wet, I think Carlos Sainz could be quite handy in those conditions. Did quite well in the wet in Silverstone. I believe he's had at least a couple other wet-ish race podiums as well. I think he got a podium in Russia 2021 as well. So again, my podium's kind of all over the place because I have two drivers on the podium who I'm predicting are going to be there if it's wet, and then I have my race winner who I'm predicting if it's not wet. So definitely not the most coherent podium prediction, kind of, I guess, an average of whatever. But yeah, that's my preview for the 2024 Brazilian Grand Prix. Looking forward to this weekend quite a bit. And let me know your predictions in the comment section down below. And again, if you've just stumbled across this video randomly, liking the video and subscribing would also help massively, and I would really sincerely appreciate it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.